Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
What happens when Ralph Macchio sits on The View expecting a simple debate, only for Joy Behar to push him so hard he finally snaps? It started as a conversation about banning TikTok nationwide. It ended with Ralph standing up, ripping off his mic, and storming off live on television while the hosts sat frozen in shock. Viewers at home couldn't believe what they were watching.
The studio lights warmed the set of The View as the audience filed in with that restless buzz that usually fills the room before a big guest arrives. The host sat at the curved table chatting casually, but everyone kept glancing at the side entrance. Ralph Macchio hadn't been on daytime TV in years, and the crowd was eager. When the stage manager counted down and the cameras went live, the applause filled the room before Whoopi even introduced him. "Please welcome Ralph Macchio," she said with a smile. Ralph walked out in a navy jacket, smiling politely as he waved. The cheers grew louder, and he gave that familiar nod people remembered from the 80s. He took his seat next to Joy Behar, who didn't return the smile. She folded her arms, studying him in a way that already felt loaded. Whoopi kicked things off. "Ralph, we're talking today about whether TikTok should be banned nationwide. You've been vocal about being cautious with social platforms. What worries you the most?" Ralph leaned forward, calm and steady. "Look, I'm not calling for anyone's freedom to be taken away, but when you have an app with that much influence over young people, you have to ask hard questions. Who's collecting their data? How does it affect attention spans, emotional health, basic social skills? I think we're overdue for stronger guardrails." The audience murmured in agreement. Ralph spoke with measured clarity, and he had the room with him. Joy shifted in her chair, tapping her pen on the desk. "Guardrails or censorship? Because what you're describing sounds like the same panic we saw when rock music came out or when video games became violent. It always comes back to blaming technology instead of parenting." Ralph kept his tone steady. "This isn't the same as a guitar or a joystick. We're talking about a company using an algorithm designed to be addictive. It's not a toy. It affects how kids see themselves, how they process information. Pretending it's harmless isn't realistic." Joy lifted her eyebrows. "So your solution is to ban an app 170 million Americans use?" He shook his head. "I never said that. I said we need to understand what it's doing before we pretend it's just fun dancing videos." Some of the audience nodded, impressed by how composed he stayed. Joy leaned back, letting out a long breath as if she were already exhausted by him. Sonny tried to step in, but "I think what Ralph is saying is that there's a conversation we haven't fully had, and maybe banning isn't the first step, but no, let's not dance around it. Ralph thinks TikTok is dangerous enough to take off the market. Just say that." Ralph looked at her, a small smile forming. "Joy, you're putting my words in your mouth." "Oh, please, you're doing the karate block thing, dodging instead of answering." The audience laughed lightly, but Ralph didn't. He straightened, eyes steady. "I'm answering you clearly. You're choosing not to hear it." That shifted the room. The laugh faded. Several people leaned forward as if sensing the start of something more serious. Whoopi cleared her throat. "Let's keep it civil." But Ralph and Joy kept their eyes locked. The tension was no longer subtle. It was right there on the table between them, tightening the air. Ralph's jaw flexed slightly. Joy's foot tapped under the desk. It was only the first segment, but something sharper had already taken root, something neither of them seemed interested in softening. And just like that, sparks on stage were lit.
The energy in the studio shifted as they returned from the commercial break. The audience clapped, but it wasn't the warm applause from earlier. It had that tight, uncertain edge that comes when viewers know they're walking back into an argument already underway. Joy sat forward, hands clasped, eyes locked on Ralph like she'd been waiting for the cameras to roll again so she could spring. Ralph stayed calm, but there was a stiffness in his shoulders now, the kind that showed he was bracing for round two. Whoopi tried to ease in. "So, Ralph, before the break, you were saying we should understand how TikTok affects young people before we decide what to do about it." But Joy cut in almost instantly. "Except he's not answering the actual question. Ralph, I'm asking whether you think it should be banned or not. Yes or no. It's not complicated." Ralph breathed out slowly. "Joy, it is complicated. That's the point. It's not a light switch you flip on national policy." She shook her head. "See, that's the dodge again. You're dancing around it so you don't sound extreme, but you also want to look protective. You can't have it both ways." He turned toward her fully. What I want is responsibility. This platform has been linked to behavioral shifts, sleep disruption, attention issues, and extremist content slipping through the cracks. When something affects an entire generation, maybe taking a pause isn't the worst idea. Joy raised her voice. That's called parenting, not policymaking. A ripple of reaction ran through the crowd, half agreeing, half wincing. Sarah jumped in, trying to soften things. I think Ralph's concern is less about blaming parents and more about the structural design of the app, but Joy didn't stop. Kids are going to latch onto something. If it's not TikTok, it'll be something else. We can't bubble wrap them because adults are scared of the internet. Ralph's patience thinned. I'm not scared of the internet. I'm concerned about manipulation disguised as entertainment. AI-driven algorithms decide what kids see before kids even understand what they're absorbing. Joy smirked. And you think banning TikTok solves that? That's adorable. A loud ooh swept across the audience. Ralph's jaw tightened. The smirk had done more than the words. He leaned in. Joy, I didn't come here to be mocked. I came here to have a real discussion. Then have one. Stop floating in this vague moral high ground and say what you mean. Whoopi raised her hands. Both of you, take a breath. But Joy wasn't done pushing. She pointed at Ralph like she was delivering a closing argument. People use TikTok to build careers, express themselves, create communities. You can't just say, pause it, like it's a toy you can take away. Ralph fired back, voice firmer now. If a community depends on an unhealthy platform to exist, then it was built on a broken foundation. That doesn't mean those people don't matter. It means we need safer ground. The audience murmured. A few clapped, a few groaned. The division was now visible. Joy turned to the crowd as if recruiting them. He wants to take away people's livelihood. Hear what he's actually saying. Ralph shook his head. No, I'm saying safety matters more than entertainment. She pushed again. You're still avoiding the question. Ban or no ban? He paused, just long enough for the room to feel the weight of the moment. He said, I think that if the platform refuses to fix the harm it's causing, then yes, a ban is on the table. Gasps, audible, sharp, the kind that ripple from the front row outward. Joy sat back, triumphant. Finally, there it is. Ralph didn't flinch. You wanted honesty? That's honesty. The heat between them was no longer creeping forward. It was out in the open now, pulsing with each exchange, drawing the audience into the tension like gravity. Whoopi tried to regain control, but the debate had shifted from a simple policy conversation to something personal, direct, and volatile. And from the look on both their faces, neither one was stepping back now. The clash was fully alive.
The cameras rolled back after the next break, but the air wasn't the same. It felt heavier, tight enough that the first few rows leaned back in their chairs as if instinctively bracing. Even the host seemed more cautious. Joy had her arms crossed, foot tapping under the desk. Ralph sat upright, hands clasped together, looking like he was weighing something he didn't want to say, but knew he eventually would. Whoopi cleared her throat. Let's try to get to the heart of the issue here. This isn't just about policy. It's about what we think kids are facing today. Ralph stayed quiet for a moment. Too quiet. Then he opened his hand on the table, almost like he was putting something down between them. You want honesty? He asked, voice lower now. Here it is. I have a family member, someone very young, who spiraled because of TikTok. The room went still. Joy's expression softened for a split second before she caught herself. Ralph continued, eyes fixed on the desk as if replaying old scenes. He was 13, just 13, starting to feel unsure about herself in that normal teenage way. But the algorithm didn't give her harmless videos. It dragged her into a rabbit hole of appearance obsession, crash diets, comparison culture. Every day she woke up to content telling her she wasn't enough unless she looked like the girls on her feed. He looked up now, and the emotion behind his eyes was impossible to miss. I watched her stop eating breakfast, then lunch. Then she started hiding dinner.
I watched her become someone who didn't know how to look in a mirror without flinching. A heavy hush swept through the room. Even Joy stopped tapping her foot. Ralph took a breath. We didn't even realize how bad it had gotten until she landed in the hospital, dehydrated, malnourished. 14-year-old girl. You'd think the world would protect her. Instead, she was being taught how to disappear. Several people in the audience exhaled sharply. A couple covered their mouths. Ralph went on, voice tight. And when the doctors asked where she was getting the ideas, it came back to TikTok. The challenge videos, the toxic comparison loops, the so-called advice accounts that preach perfection disguised as wellness. Joy's jaw tensed. She didn't interrupt. Not yet. So when you sit there, Ralph said, turning his body toward her, and tell me banning TikTok is the same as panicking over rock music or violent games, you're missing the reality families face right now. This is different. This is an algorithm that learns your insecurities and feeds them until you break. His voice cracked on the last word. He blinked hard but didn't hide it. The audience murmured, softer this time, like sympathy moving through a crowd. Sonny leaned forward gently. "Ralph, I'm so sorry your family went through that." He nodded. "She's stable now, getting help. But the platform that fueled her collapse is still running full speed, still doing the same thing to kids every day." Joy finally spoke, her tone less sharp but still defensive. "Ralph, I'm not dismissing her experience. I'm saying banning the whole platform because of one tragic case." He lifted his hand quickly. "It's not one case, Joy. You know that. Look at the reports, the lawsuits, the parents begging for change. This isn't a freak occurrence." Joy tried again, but the room wasn't on her side at the moment. The audience wasn't shifting uncomfortably this time. They were watching Ralph, absorbing his story. He leaned back, breathing out. "I'm not here to score points. I'm here because I'm tired of pretending these platforms don't have consequences." Joy exhaled slowly, then sat up straighter, walls snapping back into place. "I hear you, I do, but we can't legislate based on emotion." Ralph's eyes hardened. "Sometimes emotion is what wakes people up." That line struck. The crowd reacted with a low hum, some nodding, some murmuring. The flashpoint wasn't just a moment of vulnerability. It was Ralph laying bare the thing he'd been carrying, the reason his voice carried so much weight. And now that it was out, the temperature of the room had changed again. Only this time, it was building towards something more explosive.
The moment they came back from the next break, everyone could tell the tone had shifted again. The audience sat forward in a tight semicircle of anticipation, waiting to see whether Ralph and Joy would cool down or ignite. The hosts exchanged quick glances that said they already knew the answer. Joy didn't wait for Whoopi to reset the conversation. She leaned toward Ralph, her voice sharper than before. "Your story is heartbreaking, and I'm glad your family member is doing better. But we cannot run a country based on personal tragedies. We'd be banning everything from smartphones to soda if we did that." The audience murmured, half uneasy, half intrigued. Ralph turned toward her slowly, and something in his expression cracked. The restraint he'd been holding on to started slipping away. "Ralph," he said, "this isn't soda. This isn't even smartphones. This is a platform proven to manipulate kids using AI that's more advanced than most adults understand." Joy fired back. "So what? You want to outlaw anything that uses AI?" "No," Ralph said, voice tightening. "I want companies to stop pretending they're harmless when they profit off mental collapse." Joy crossed her arms. "That's dramatic." Ralph's jaw tightened. "It's reality." Whoopi stepped in, trying to redirect. "Let's acknowledge there are valid concerns on both sides." Joy interrupted again. "No, because he's making this emotional plea and framing it as fact. I'm sorry about his niece or cousin or whoever." Ralph snapped. "She's my goddaughter." The room went dead silent. Blink, but kept going. "Fine, your goddaughter, but that still doesn't mean millions of Americans should lose access to a platform they rely on." Ralph leaned forward, eyes sharp. Why are you defending an app that's harming kids? What exactly do you owe them? A shocked gasp erupted. Joy recoiled like she'd been slapped. Oh, you dare imply I'm shilling for TikTok. I'm defending freedom, something you seem eager to trample. He shook his head. You're defending convenience, entertainment, not freedom. Joy pointed at him. You're grandstanding because it makes you look noble, but underneath all this outrage, you're still dodging the truth. You can't protect every kid. Parents have to step up. Government can't babysit. Ralph slammed his palm on the table, not loud, but firm enough to echo. The audience jumped. Parents can't keep up with an algorithm that rewrites itself every day. You think moms and dads have time to decode AI manipulation between working 2 jobs or dealing with real life? The app knows your child better than you do, and it uses that information to keep them hooked. That is not parenting. That is exploitation. Joyce shot back. Then delete the app from your house. Why does the entire country need to bend to your fear? He leaned forward, voice low but intense. Because pretending it's harmless is how we lose entire generations. Joy lifted her chin, eyes flashing. And I say banning it is a lazy solution. You want to fix the problem? Teach kids balance. Teach parents awareness, not take away an entire platform. That's not enough, Ralph said, rising halfway out of his seat before Whoopi touched his arm. Sit, Ralph. Let's not... But he didn't sit, and Joy didn't back down. She stood too, matching him. You think you're the only one who cares about kids? You think I don't see what's happening out there? He shook his head. You're minimizing it. You're weaponizing it, Joy shot back. That line landed like a punch. Ralph froze, then slowly reached for his mic cord. His breathing was sharp now, the kind that comes when someone is trying not to say something they'll regret. Joy realized too late the effect her words had. Ralph, she started, but he pulled off the mic. The audience gasped. The crew scrambled in confusion. Whoopi stood, stunned. Ralph looked at Joy one last time, voice quiet but cutting. You don't get to tell me what I feel. Then he turned, stepped away from the table, and walked off the set. The audience exploded with noise, gasps, shouts, even a few cheers. Joy stood frozen, her face pale, her mouth open as the moment she caused played out in front of her. Ralph didn't look back, not once. And the View had just witnessed a breaking point the show wasn't prepared for.
The chaos didn't settle right away. The audience was still buzzing, a mix of shock and adrenaline as Ralph Macchio disappeared behind the curtain. Camera operators scrambled, producers waved frantically from offstage, and the hosts sat stunned at the table. Joy Behar stood frozen for several seconds before slowly lowering herself back into her chair, her expression drawn and unsettled. Whoopi eventually gestured to the camera. We're going to take a moment, she said, her voice softer than usual. But the show didn't go to break. The network stayed with the raw, unscripted aftermath. Sarah was the first to speak. I don't think anyone expected it to go that far. Joy pressed her hands together, staring down. I didn't expect him to walk out, she said quietly, almost to herself. The audience watched her with a mix of judgment and sympathy. Some shook their heads, others whispered to each other, replaying his final words under their breath. Whoopi turned to Joy with a level look. Sometimes people share things that cost them a lot, and we have to handle that gently. Joy nodded, swallowing hard. I know. I wasn't trying to minimize what happened to his family. I pushed too hard. The admission didn't erase what happened, but it softened the atmosphere. A few audience members murmured in approval. Others looked unconvinced. Sonny chimed in. Regardless of where you stand on the TikTok issue, that was a man talking about someone he loves. We can't pretend that doesn't change the tone. Joyce sighed heavily. I should have backed off sooner. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, social media had already erupted. Clips of Ralph standing, pulling off his mic, and storming out were everywhere. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag Ralph versus Joy. Hashtag View Meltdown. Hashtag TikTok debate gone wrong. Some users praised Ralph for speaking from the heart. Others criticized Joy for pushing him past his breaking point. A few framed the moment as one of the most intense walk-offs in the show's history. When the cameras returned to Joy for the final minute, she looked directly into the lens. Ralph, if you're watching this, I hope your goddaughter is okay, and I hope we can talk again when emotions aren't so high. It was the closest thing to an apology she'd ever given on air. As the show wrapped, the audience gave a steady, conflicted applause. Not loud, not soft, just uncertain, like everyone was still processing what they'd witnessed. The doors opened, and people filed out quietly, whispering to each other about the moment they'd remember long after the episode ended. The day Ralph Macchio reached his limit and walked off the view. And online, the fire only grew. If you enjoyed this showdown, subscribe for more dramatic celebrity clashes, behind-the-scenes tension, and unforgettable TV blow-ups.